from SIS institutions? Alright, some of you. Alright. I'm not likely to remember that. Don't worry.
Okay, this is the first time we are getting opportunity to talk to ma'am directly or anybody who is a panelist of a B school in a very informal way. So ma'am, I'll ask you a couple of questions. I've been a panelist of few B schools and college companies, but मेरा अपना तरीका होता है, हर एक अपना तरीका होता है. For example, the moment a person entered to the room for the interview, and the moment that he start talking, for me 50% damage is done. 80% is done. From my point of view, this is because maybe I'm judging the first impression, last impression. So that's my take. What is your take on that?
Well, I would like to put it the other way. Not the damage is done, but I would say the impression is already made to some extent. And I would say a little earlier than that. If you're seeing somebody from a distance also, you're forming an opinion. Maybe it's judgmental, but you're forming an impression about the individual. However, sometimes, and it often happens that when we sit across from them, we are very surprised because the impression we formed of them just watching them and from when our interaction with them, it's often very different. But yes, there is an initial impression which is formed, and that is because we are running a business school. We are part of a professional course. So when students enter for an interview, we expect them to come in somewhat prepared for the interview that they are coming for. That means their attire, their dress, their grooming makes an impression.
And how much percent is that? Approximately like 1/3?
I would say maybe 1/4.
1/4.
All right, because a lot of it also depends upon talking to them, finding out what they've done so far in their life, and not just academic. Some of them may not have excellent academic records, but they may have done other things which are interesting, or which at least tells us that they have the right aptitude or the right attitude for the profession that they have now chosen, and that it's not a fallback profession.
Ma'am, second question is that sometimes panelists intentionally ask the question which they also know student cannot answer. That I especially when you go to IIMs interview a few times, maybe a stress interview. So if a student is not able to answer the correct answer, so is that going against him, or is it like, okay, it's normal?
I don't think it goes against them so much, unless it's as you said, if it's a difficult question, it's being deliberately asked because they can't answer, then I think the faculty also knows that this student who's a youngster, who's a fresh pass out, will not know the answer. They're probably just trying to see how well do they field something that is difficult. Do they get disturbed? Do they get upset? Sometimes do they start crying? Is that what happens to them? In that case, we are also possibly judging how much grit do they have. It's not that we are judging them on their knowledge, we are judging them on their grit and their determination. I appreciate a student who tells me, I'm very sorry, I don't know this, but I'll probably be upset if the student says, I don't know this, if I've asked you who's the president of the country.
Okay, great. So, ma'am, next question is like nowadays B schools are giving marks. Like the interview is not a rejection process.
No.
So it's more of a like if I don't like you, I'll not give you that much marks. So this same goes for SIS as well, or?
Yes, I mean, SIS has multiple parameters on which it evaluates. Your All India examination through which you're coming in, the competitive exam is 1 point. The other is your academic record so far. How well have you fared in your 10th and 12th? Because often the graduation marks are not yet in when you're applying. Also, how well have you done in our own GDPI? That to us matters a lot more because I think most of the faculty have been here for a long period of time. Those who are your panelists would all be people who have been with Syscoms a long time, and they know what is the best fitment for us. We are not looking at the best material, we are looking at the best trainable material.
Why I ask you this question? Because when I used to sit for the interviews, I used to get scared. And पसीना आता था, टाइल लगता ही मैं गया पूरा. That used to be my problem because I used to think the panelists hold my career. Okay. But the moment you start thinking he cannot reject you, he can just give you less marks.
That's all.
So if you have other things, strong thing, it can cover up the gap as well.
It definitely can. And also, I think Ravneet, each child today has a lot of options. If not Syscoms, then there is X, Y, and Z. If not Wellinger, then there is X, Y, and Z. So there is a lot of option that children have. And also, 1 year, one examination doesn't make or break your career. There is so much of opportunity. But as I said, it's not the only option. There are a lot of people who join Syscoms who later tell me that, ma'am, we thought, hamara to nahi hoga. My interview didn't go well. I do have a student here in class right now who told me that I felt so bad when you had asked me these questions. I never thought I would make it because I didn't answer anything you asked. I said, fair enough, you didn't, but you had the aptitude to be able to pick up, which was much more important than having the right answer.
It happened with me other way around as well. There have been students जिसको ये भी कहा गया था कि which room number you want or which roll number you want in the college, and then he's rejected outright. So it happened both ways as well. Ma'am, do you have any experiences when students started crying in front of you? Any funny experience, something?
Definitely, I've had the experience of a student crying in front of me. I'm quite famous for making people cry. But the crying is sometimes funny, yes, because there was no cause for it. And sometimes it's also sad reasons why students cry. A lot of them are crying because there is so much pressure on them, maybe family pressure, maybe peer pressure, that if they don't perform at their optimum, they are very hard on themselves, which I feel is sad, that they shouldn't be crying because they feel they have not performed very well. I also feel that, sometimes we as human beings do make errors. As teachers, as evaluators, as interviewers, sometimes after a whole day, 2 days, 3 days of interviewing, we could also slip up and maybe you have not caught us at the right moment.
And do you let those kind of things pass by, or will not affect his candidature?
I don't think it affects their candidature. And in Syscoms, we have 2 rounds of interviews. So let's say Sharmila is having a bad day, it's not necessarily the other interviewer they're going to is having a bad day. Alright, so it's a combination of 2 scores plus your GD scores and everything else that goes towards making up the final.
So you also agree the panelists का emotional level also affect the students?
Generally not, क्योंकि इनको हमें place अभी नहीं करना है. हमको just we have to decide whether they fit into our institute or not. We are much more critical when we are taking their vivas, because for us they are a responsibility. Once they've joined us, their placements is our responsibility. So we want them to be as perfect as possible. Those who are entering, we know are not going to be perfect.
Last question is quite controversial and quite simple as well. Like good in, good out with a normal concept. Okay. So what I feel personally, that a lot of B schools are moving towards checking out whether the student is employable or not.
All right.
Is that something which you as a panelist, individual panelist, not talking about the college point of view, you as a panelist, do you look for that kind of thing कि ये 10 लाख की नौकरी के लायक है कि नहीं है या 12 लाख की नौकरी के लायक है कि नहीं है? Because
you want a serious answer to that one?
Yeah.
All right. Then I'll give you the serious answer. Then I'll give you the answer which actually fits. The serious answer is I'm not really looking at whether Asian Paints is going to pick you up, or whether Reliance is going to pick you up, or HDFC Bank is going to pick you up. Are you a fitment for those who are our regular employers? That's not what I'm looking at. What I'm looking at is, why are you doing this? And sometimes I'm surprised. मुझे नहीं लग रहा था ये 10 लाख वाला बच्चा है, पर इसको 10 लाख मिला. So that also surprises me कि जब ये इंटरव्यू किया था इसको तो नहीं लग रहा था कि अच्छा ठीक है मे भी 5 लाख वाला बच्चा है, बट इसको 11 लाख और 12 लाख भी मिला. That also happens.
Ma'am, no, any advice you would like to give now? I'm opening the mic to you now. It's only totally your wish now.
I think I will just give one advice, that this is generalization. You need to be at least aware of your surroundings. And that means the state you live in, the district you live in, the country you live in. That's very important today, and more important in these times when we are in an election year. So I think every student is our future. And if the future is not well informed, somewhere that matters. So I'm not sure I want to know whether you know the chiefs of every bank in India, but I definitely wish that you would know something more about what is India's GDP, what is India's export, how well does India do in the world economy, etc., etc. These are general questions a lot of faculty will ask you in any B school that you are going to. It's not just Syscoms, but anywhere you're going. And it's very, very important that you be sure of why you're doing this. You are going into a postgraduate course, so it's important that you do this out of free will. Not because your parents told you to do it, your friend is doing it, etc. And yes, this is where we fail, that as she said, this is why we are here, because we want that package. That bothers me. On an individual level, it bothers me, and on a professional level, as a teacher, it bothers me, because that tells me that you're only looking at an exit, not the learning. And it's important that in a business school you learn. And a lot of learning is not going to happen from me. It's going to happen from the people that you sit with, the self-learning in peer groups. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm open to questions that you may have.